All right. You pass these out for me. Who needs the one with the answers? The ones with everything? I know you do. Anybody else want one? I've got like 4 of them. No, you can see the screen. No, I'm not going to cheat like that. You want one of these that already has answers on? You want one of these? Yes. Has answers on. Yeah. So maybe need to delete this one, Chad. No.
Almost down the road.
Yes.
Ask you a question.
Yeah.
Growing up, you always would see KJV 1611.
Yeah.
Why is it 1900? Is that a newer, better edition?
No. So, this is why I don't use the King. This is why I don't use the 1611. Can you read that? Can you read that?
Oh.
That's Old English. This is Old English.
Oh, yeah.
You see? Look.
Oh, that's just so good.
Don't you see that right there? That's evil.
Oh.
That means the evil tongue. EUILL. That's
So the 1611.
well. This is the King. This is the Old English. Okay. We don't use the 1611. None of our King James Bibles are 1611. They're all roughly 1886 or 1900. This Bible right here is 1900. King James 1900 edition. All that is just been updated to more modern English. The spelling, from taking it from Old English to
Still Old English, it's
Yeah.
just spelling is,
so you saw how they spell evil? EUILL.
Yeah.
That's how they spell evil. Well, that's not how you spell evil,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Because they spelled it the way it sounded to them. Figure Old English, British, the way they used to talk. So that's how it sounded to them, right? So these are none of our Bibles are 1611 unless it looks just like that over there. That is a 1611. That's the 400th anniversary edition of the King James Bible. So that's what the original 1611 looked like. So when so all the stuff you'll see that I use will be 1900 edition.
Yeah, I've never,
Yeah.
my whole life I've heard, oh, yeah, 1611.
Yeah, that's it. It's such a misnomer, and unfortunately that's gotten a lot of independent Baptists a bad rep because they're like, oh, we stand with 1611. No, you don't. You don't even have the 1611, man. You can't read the 1611.
Yeah.
It's very hard to read. It's very hard. And so I got the King James, and I did a whole study on this for Sunday school. But I say on the King James because I like it. It is what God has used to preserve it down through the ages, and that's why I use it. And none of your Bibles today, unless you specifically find a 1611 King James Bible, will be 1611. 1886, 1900, some are even 1907. It's just an updated English version. That's all it is. Still using the these, the thous, and stuff, but and the wherefores, but it's just more modern, easier to read. That's all it is. So yeah.
Yeah, okay.
All right. So tonight we don't have long. It's just one page tonight, but so we are diving into. We're still continuing on to our study here of the superiority of Christ over the angels, and all right. So the superiority of Christ over the angels, And so, we've looked so far at the very beginning, verses 1 through 3, we looked at was Christ superior over the prophets. His superiority over the prophets, because we know the whole book of Hebrews is what? It's about what? Christ being what? Superior. Better. Christ is better. Okay, and so that's the whole thing about Hebrews. So we looked at Hebrews 1 through 3, and we know that he was superior to the prophets. And why did Paul have to take that time to make it aware that he's superior to the prophets? Who can tell me? Why did he have to do that? Why did Paul want to take that time to do that?
Because people were trying to consider things like Moses and Elijah.
What was the one key event that really really proved, I guess, to his disciples, proved to Jesus' disciples that Christ was superior to the prophets? What key event was that?
When
Peter and John
were at
on the mount,
on the mount,
Transfiguration. Yep.
and then God said, "This is my son."
Hear ye him. Yep. Because Peter wanted to make tabernacles for Moses and Elijah there on the mount. Yes, very good reading. And so we saw the superiority of he's superior over the prophets, and then we started looking at the superiority of Christ over the angels. Now this is one of the longer portions, because this superiority of Christ over the angels is going to run all the way into chapter 2. And so last week, or the last couple of weeks, we looked at his superiority because of his authority. And then we looked at, I think, superiority because of his affirmation, I believe it was. And so we looked at those two things, and I could not keep the alliteration going. I tried to keep it going with A's, but I couldn't, just to make it easier for myself. So tonight, we're going to start looking at the continuation of that, he being superior over the angels. And so the very first thing that we're going to see about he is superior because of his honor. He's superior because of his honor. Let's all turn to Hebrews chapter 1, verse number 6. Hebrews chapter 1, and we'll start in verse number 6. Hebrews chapter 1 and verse number 6 says, "And again, when he bringeth in the first begotten into the world, he saith, and let all the angels of God worship him." And so that is, he's superior because of his honor. Christ is superior over the angels because of his honor. Now how is this to be? Because all we have here is that, again, when he bringeth the first begotten into the world, he saith, and let all the angels of God worship him. Well, I think the main reason why Paul was using this, was wanting to bring this up, and the reason why he used the first begotten into the world was because of Old Testament law. These were Hebrews, so you got to figure a lot of them were very familiar with the law. And so using the law, he brings this up because the first begotten of any royalty or any lineage of kingship, the first begotten was always going to have the place of honor. He was always going to have the place of honor. He was always going to be the one that got chosen to be to take over the family. He was the one who was going to get anointed. He was going to be given over to the Lord, so he was to be consecrated to God. So the first begotten, the firstborn, was always the honored one in the family. Now, of course, we don't see this with Jesse and all of his sons. We don't see this because his first begotten wasn't even chosen. It was his last one that was chosen in that situation. But we have the Old Testament law. So they had to. He wanted them to He wanted the readers to understand that his honor is given to him by the angels. Because it says, "And again he bringeth into the first begotten into the world, he saith, and let all the angels of God worship him." So the first half, I think several of the other verses that we've looked at all have direct quotations back to another verse in the Old Testament. Almost all of them do. But the first half of this verse doesn't. There's no direct quotation of the Old Testament. So he's pretty much just telling them that, hey, he is the firstborn, the first begotten of God, and because of that, he has honor. But using that word first begotten is of significance. Okay? And so the next thing that we see, not only was he the Old Testament law, then we see the worship. So then we see the worship there. And it says, so the last part of this verse, I think you have it there on your handout, is a direct quotation from Psalms 97 and 7. 97 verse number 7. It says, "Confounded be all they that serve graven images, that boast themselves of idols, worship him, all ye gods." And so this is, you say, well, that's not a direct quotation. Well, actually, the last 5 words of Psalms 97:7 actually cover the last part of verse number 6 of Hebrews chapter 1. But you say, but that one says angels in chapter 1, verse 6, and this says gods. Well, the Hebrew word for gods, little g gods, is Elohim, which was used for the little g gods or goddesses or angels. And that is the exact same word that is used here there in Psalms 97:7. But anytime you see the word God, big G God, the noun El, E-L, was used specifically for him. I personally believe myself that Paul used the word angels instead of gods because of the level that they had placed angels on. So he used words. He didn't want to go in and say gods right out of Psalms 97:7. He wanted them to understand that you've placed angels up here. And now I'm telling you that God has sent his first begotten Son into the world, and because of that, the angels that you worship are going to bow down to him. And so he's wanting to really bring that out into the open and bring that up and pretty much throw it in their face and say, you think so much of the angels. Well, I'm telling you, the angels are going to bow down and worship the Son. And so this is just great proof was that the Son and it had been made so much better than the angels. The angels were so far from being on the same level as Christ that God tells them to worship him. Jesus was undoubtedly worshipped by the angels in eternity past. He was worshipped by the angels during his 33 years on earth. And he is worshipped in eternity present. A worship to which we have really been given a little glimpse of. And this is in Revelation chapter number 5. Verses 11 through 13, it says, "And I, behold, and I heard the voice of many angels round about the throne, and the beast, and the elders, and the number of them was 10,000 times 10,000, and thousands of thousands, saying with a loud voice, Worthy is the Lamb that was slain, and to receive power, and riches, and wisdom, and strength, and honor, and glory, and blessing, all every creature which is in heaven, on the earth, and under the earth, and such as are in the sea, and all that are in them, heard I saying, Blessing, and honor, and glory, and power be unto him that sitteth upon the throne, and unto the Lamb forever and ever." So we see the angels will fall down and worship him. And so they worship him in eternity past. They worship him for 33 and a half years while he was on this earth. And they worship him in eternity present and future. So the angels, unless they are fallen angels, do not worship other angels. For that would be angelolatry, I guess you would say. The only one they can and do worship is God himself. Why were the angels made? Why were they created? We've talked about this. Why were they created? There's one reason they were created.
Praise God.
To worship God. That's it. That's their plain and one purpose only, was to worship God. And so that was their main creation purpose. Our job is to lift up Jesus, and the angel's job is to worship him. We worship Jesus as well, but we lift him up as well too. So the next thing that we see, he is superior because of his status. He is superior because of his status. So the writer, Paul, here is going to demonstrate the superiority of Christ to the angels by contrasting their statuses. If we look here in verse number 7, we see, and of the angels he saith, who maketh his angels spirits, and his ministers a flame of fire. Well, that word, what does that word minister mean? What is the underlying word of minister?
People who tend to.
Servants, right? It's a servant. So the angels are servants. That's what Paul is saying here in Hebrews 1:7. They are servants. And this, in Psalms 104:4, is the corresponding Old Testament verse to go along with verse number 7 of Hebrews chapter 1. It says, who maketh his angels spirits, and his ministers a flaming fire. The Spirit's purpose in quoting the verse in Hebrews 1 is evident. It was to point a contrast between the natures of the angels and the natures of the Son. They were made or created, but the Son was not created. He was uncreated. Not only were the angels created, but they were created by Christ himself, who maketh, which looks back to the last clause of verse number 2, this is all coming from A.W. Pink's book on Hebrews, says, he, the Son, made the worlds. It is the making of the worlds that Psalms 104 speaks of. They are termed not merely the angels, but what is specific about, there's something specific. I think if we look back at, let's see here. Yeah, so look with me there in verse number 7. It says, who maketh what? What does it say? His angels. His angels. And then it says, his ministers. Okay? And in Psalms 104:4 says, who maketh his angels spirits, and his ministers a flaming fire. So they're not just merely angels. They're his angels. He created them. They're the ones that are going to worship him. He created these angels. So they're nothing but spirits, and he is God. They are his ministers. He is their head. This goes back to Colossians 2:10. And it says, and ye are complete in him, which is the head of all principality and power. So we see that the angels are the servants, but the Son is sovereign. The Son is sovereign. Hebrews 1:8-9. We're going to do this one real quick, and we'll be done. Hebrews 1:8-9. But unto the Son he saith, thy throne, O God, is forever and ever. A scepter of righteousness is the scepter of thy kingdom. Thou hast loved righteousness and hated iniquity. Therefore God, even thy God, hath hated iniquity. Therefore God, even thy God, hath anointed thee with the oil of gladness above thy fellows. Here the writer quotes Psalms 45:6-7. Psalms 45:6-7 says, thy throne, O God, is forever and ever. The scepter of the kingdom is right scepter. Thou lovest righteousness and hatest wickedness. Therefore God, thy God, hath anointed thee with the oil of gladness above thy fellows. We're not going to have time to break this down. I wanted to break this down into each part, and we'll just cover that the next time we meet. As we see, and what I think is interesting, the more that more I study this, the more I see more and more referral back to the Old Testament. There's a lot of Old Testament references that are coming across in this Hebrews. And the reason for that is because he's dealing with Hebrews. He's dealing with those that are very familiar with the Old Testament. And so he's wanting to show them from the Old Testament how the one that they crucified, the one that they put on the cross, the one that they now found faith in, he is the one that's superior to all. He is better than all. And so he's doing that by going back to the Old Testament. So we'll look at the rest of that verse of verse number 8 and 9 next week. So anybody have any questions? I know it was kind of hastily there, but anybody got any questions, anything? Yes, Jason.
Real quick, obviously Lucifer was an angel. He thought he could overtake.
Yeah.
He's the devil now. Do all angels have free reign to make their own decisions? Like, have angels fallen since then? Or?
No, I don't believe so. The Bible doesn't state that fact of whether or not. I just know that 1/3 of them fell when Lucifer fell. He took 1/3 of them with him. And so that tells me if there was 1/3, that means that there was a set number of angels.
Right.
And God created a set number of them, and so he only lost 1/3. So there's
he
2/3 that are
created
still there.
If he created them in a spirit, that means they still had like free will to choose, but almost like a human?
I believe that's the case because that's the only way that it could happen. That's the only way that Satan could choose to raise himself above God, and that's what brought him above God. Or that's what he wanted to be more than God. He wanted to be God. And so he made that choice, and therefore 1/3 of the angels he took with him. And so they made a choice to go with him as well.
So they're humanly thinking, flesh-led spirits.
They're not, I think they have, that is a very, very interesting question. And I've really never thought of that like that. And you just got my mind going. I think I'm going to have to study that one out. But that is a good one. I think looking at what Satan did would make me want to say that it was they have a free will to do what they want to do. Because Satan was in perfect position. Lucifer was the closest to God other than Christ. He was right there with the devil, or with God, right? And so, and because of that, he was beautiful, right? And
He was
voiced,
the most beautiful.
he was the most beautiful angel ever created, and he had the most beautiful voice. That's why he is the prince and the power of the air. He moves across the airwaves. Okay, that's how he gets to us, is by music. I do strongly believe that. Okay, and so he was created. He was the best one. He was in a perfect position, and he threw it all away. So it makes me think that God did give them a free will to choose.
So if we as humans fall short of the glory of God, we ask forgiveness, we're forgiven. We can come back to God pretty much. Could Lucifer's followers do the same?
No.
They were cast out.
So they
The
have free
reason
will.
being is because we are direct lineage of Adam. Adam was created in the image of God. The angels were not. Adam was created to be even more better than the angels. He was the first Adam. Okay, he was supposed to be perfect. He was in a perfect environment. He was perfect in all aspects until he did the one thing that God told him not to do, and he failed. God loves human race more than the angels. Therefore, he had to give them a way to be redeemed back to him. The angels, there's no way they can be redeemed back. The ones that failed, they're failed. Jude tells us they are bound in hell. They're bound in chains. They're there. They're part of the Lucifer's army, and they're in hell right now, bound. There's no way for them to get out. Just like there's no way for Lucifer to be redeemed. He can't be. I think if there was, he wouldn't even choose to be. He wouldn't even want to be redeemed. Even if he could be, he wouldn't want to be. And so that's what's so special about us in God's eyes, is that we are so important to him, we are so precious to God, that he sent his only begotten Son for us. Not the angels, but for us. And so I think that is something. Even though they're created to worship him, they were created with beauty and honor and righteousness. But we were created in his image. We were created for him. They were created to worship him, but we were created for him. Does that make sense? We were created to be his children. because it is his will that all men come to repentance, and that there be none that perish. And therefore, because of that, he sent us away so that that doesn't happen. We just have to make that choice to go that way. So, I'm sure I'm probably confused more than I helped, but I'm gonna study that out about the angels. That's,
Well, it's, for me, and having little girls, it's so, I don't wanna say interesting, but you know, you see all this demonic looking, like, face paintings, the pointy teeth, the horns, the upside down crosses, and we call that demonic, right?
right.
But really, is demonic that ugly? If the devil is so beautiful?
No, so I'm gonna tell you this, that they can transform themselves into the angels of light. They can be the most beautiful thing you've ever seen. They have the power to do that.
Lure.
So I think Satan himself has used that, what we have pictured demonic, he's used that to kind of blind us. And so the devil could be in here right now, we wouldn't even know it.
Yeah.
There's devils that get behind the pulpit every Sunday. There's devils that play the piano. I mean, there's devils in the church. I mean, his angels are in the church every single. Y'all are like, what? Yeah. Look, sometimes, okay, sometimes. No, and she would probably say, yeah, sometimes. But you know I think Satan has used our picture of demonic. He's used it for his advantage, and it's got us looking this way, just like the Democrats are doing right now. They've got us. They got us looking over here while they're doing over here.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying?
Well, and now, they don't even hide it, and I'll shut up for this, but you know, Tracy and I send stuff back and forth every day, but it is mind-blowing, the stuff that even Christian parents let their children watch, like these young girl singers, like these movie actors.
Yeah, if you look, I know y'all don't, because y'all probably don't even know who that is.
It was made after the 70s, we don't know.
But Taylor Swift is being used by Satan. I mean, it's not like, yeah.
I mean, if you look at what's it called? Illuminati stuff, whatever that nonsense is. But you know, when you start seeing how they're building their fame and fortune on hating God, you know, they went from these cute little innocent blonde-haired, blue-eyed girls to literally wearing snakes around their necks and upside-down crosses and.
But
That's Illuminati?
again, we go back to, that's what we're looking for. That's what we're looking for, and we're being deceived.
But they're putting it right in your face. Hey,
Exactly.
weird.
They're saying, look over here
Yeah.
while I'm doing this over here.
Yeah.
They condition us to, so it's not shocking and
It's a
terrifying.
Yeah.
numbing.
The shock factor you have to mellow to it.
Taylor
Well-
came home from school the other day and she was like, I love Taylor Swift. You don't even know who Taylor Swift is. Like, you don't listen. What do you mean?
Yeah, but we're becoming desensitized
Yeah.
to it. They're throwing it in our face so much that we become desensitized, and it doesn't bother us anymore.
Yeah, I agree. And like that another girl, JoJo Siwa or something.
Yeah.
Man, she's made hair bows, shampoos, girl backpacks, T-shirts, girl tennis shoes. I mean, she was a 15-year-old multi-billionaire off of hair bows and backpacks. And if you look at her at 15 then and look at her now in her mid-20s, disgusting. Anyways.
They try to, just everything good.
Yep.
Everything bad is
Yep.
glamorous and sparkly.
They do.
It's okay.
They do. Well, that's how we are calling evil good and good evil.
And they
Is
dig
what
a
we're
money
doing.
from them and choose that side.
We are at that point in Scripture to where things that are good are being called evil, and things that are evil being called good. That's
You
what
know,
it's-
a lot of these, that say 15, 20 years ago, some of these teenage actresses, I mean, I thought they were cute too. I look at them today,
Yeah.
and boy, I'm sorry that my
Yeah.
grandkids are watching those.
Yeah. So I'm gonna say this, and then we'll be dismissed in prayer. But I was watching a little excerpt of a news thing, and a reporter asked a Palestinian refugee, said, you see all these kids, these college kids, he says, you see the ones the males that are in fishnet stockings and dresses and have makeup on, he said, and they're protesting for Palestine. He said, what would happen if one of them went over to Palestine right now? He said, I'll tell you exactly what would happen. He said they'd be tied up, hands behind their back, they'd put up against the wall, and they'd be stoned to death.
Yep,
That's exactly what would happen to them.
yep,
He said they're protesting for people that would actually kill them.
that's right.
And I thought that was, I thought it was interesting. They have no clue.
No.
They have no clue what they're protesting for, whatsoever. All they know is they hate the Jews, period. They just don't want the Jews around. It's pretty sad that we fought an entire war over what people were doing to the Jews, and here we are. We have anti-Semitic protests happening on our own soil.
Yeah. Horrible.
Yeah. Yeah.
Pastor, the thing I thought I had come to understand about Lucifer was, and I feel like saying this to try and make it perspective. If God created all the angels and he made Lucifer the best above all, we don't know how long Lucifer was agreeable in heaven until he came up with the idea that he wanted to take the throne of God.
Yep.
So then, did he set out, he did, I thought I understood in reading, wanting to try and turn all the angels
He did.
to let him become God. In fact, when God, finally said, wait a minute, boy, you're doing wrong.
Hey, boss.
He could only get a third of them to go with him, and God said,
Yep.
like that, you're out. And all of them were cast out
It is.
at once.
Yep.
So it could have been 1,000 years that they were,
Exactly.
we don't know God's time.
Yeah, you don't know God's time. All we know is he was already here when he created the earth.
Yep.
We know he was here.
He was allowed to go between heaven and earth.
So he was already here. Because he was in the garden, so we know that. So,
Can I ask a question? Bob?
sure. Yep.
I'm not gonna give it all the time. You got grandchildren. How many you got grandchildren?
A lot.
Have you got children, all of you? Did that one of your grandchildren ever walk up to you when they was about 4 or 5 years old and say, where did God come from? What kind of answer did you give them?
What answer did you give?
In the beginning was the Word.
Yep.
And the Word was with
God,
God.
and
And
the Word was God.
God.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yep. You can't. The thing that always has been can never be created.
Can never be correct.
Thing
And
that
that's
was-
one of the questions a child asked you.
Yeah. So, yes.
Before we go, I'd like that everyone, the good thing happened today, a blessing. As Benny got to see his sons at 6 o'clock tonight.
Yeah.
For the first time in 16 months.
Oh, wow.
So let's all pray that
Praise
it
God.
went well, and pray that it won't take long for
Praise
the
God.
judge to see that
Yeah.
they should go back to their daddy.
Praise God. All right. That's good to hear. All right. Yes.